1. The whistling outside the tent. Jake and Mason had been best friends since middle school, and every summer they took a camping trip somewhere new. That year, they chose Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina, a place known for its long hiking trails, dense woods, and almost complete silence at night. Te lo bith Italiano. The first night went smooth. Food, jokes, and the usual remember when stories. But on the second night, things felt different. While they were settling into their sleeping bags around midnight, Jake whispered, "Do you hear that?" Mason listened at it first. Nothing. Then a whistle, but not like someone casually whistling. It was the same 4-note pattern, repeated again and again, slow and deliberate. W-H-E-E-U, we who, we, ooh. Probably a bird, Mason said, though he didn't sound convinced. But Jake shook his head. Birds don't whistle the same tune for minutes straight. The sound grew closer. It wasn't random. It was mobbing, circling their campsite. Mason turned off his camping lantern, and both of them sat completely still in the dark. The whistling stopped. A few seconds passed. Crunch. Someone stepped on dead leaves right outside their tent. Jake covered his mouth with his hand so his breathing wouldn't give him away. Mason slowly reached for a flashlight but didn't turn it on. Another crunch, closer this time, just inches away. Then a voice whispered, quiet, but clear. "I see you." Mason nearly dropped the flashlight. Jake froze. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. They didn't make a sound for what felt like 10 minutes. Eventually, they heard the crunching footsteps fade into the trees. They waited another hour before daring to unzip the tent. There were no tracks, no sign of another camper, no flash of a distant flashlight, nothing. But what terrified them most was that the nearest designated campsite was over 2 miles away, and the trail was steep, dark, and rocky. No one would hike it at midnight for fun. They packed up before sunrise and left. Months later, while telling the story online, someone replied saying the locals had heard that same 4-note whistle for years. No one knew who or what made it. 2. The girl by the lake. Claire and her younger brother, Riley, planned a weekend getaway at Lake Ouachita in Ouachita. Peaceful spot famous for its clear water and quiet nights. Their parents had camped there years earlier, and it felt nostalgic to continue the tradition. The first night was calm, and the lake reflected the moon like a mirror. Claire woke up early the next morning and went to sit by the water while Riley slept. That's when she noticed the girl. A little girl, maybe 9 or 10, wearing an old-fashioned white dress, standing near the lake's edge. Claire hadn't heard any cars or seen any nearby tents, but kids did wander around campgrounds sometimes, so she didn't think much of it. "Morning," Claire said softly so she wouldn't startle her. The girl didn't respond. She just stared at the lake as if waiting for something underwater to surface. "Are your parents around?" Claire asked. The girl finally turned her head. Her expression was blank. Then she walked away into the woods. No words, no reaction, nothing. Claire shook off the uncomfortable feeling and went back to the tent. Later that afternoon, she asked the campground host if any families with young kids were staying nearby. He frowned. "Nope. Quiet weekend. Just you two and some fishermen on the far side." Claire felt a chill. She didn't mention the girl. That night, around 2 a.m., Claire woke to the faint sound of water splashing, thinking maybe it was an animal. She peeked out of the tent. The little girl stood waist-deep in the lake, wearing the same white dress, staring at Claire with a blank expression. The moonlight reflected off the water around her. Claire gasped and shook Riley awake. By the time he scrambled out, the girl was gone. No ripples, no footprints, nothing. The next morning, Claire finally told the campground host everything. He looked even more concerned. "You shouldn't mess around with stories like that," he said quietly. "Years ago, a girl drowned around that exact spot. Her family's cabin burned down a year later, and the whole place has been empty since." Claire and Riley didn't stay for a third night. Every now and then, Claire dreams about the girl standing, half submerged, waiting, staring. 3. The camper never slept in the late 90s. A college student named Thomas took a solo road trip from Ohio to Montana. Along the way, he stopped at Badlands National Park in South Dakota, planning to camp for just one night before continuing west. The campground was almost empty. He picked a quiet site, set up his tent, and cooked a small meal before sunset. As he ate, he noticed a man a few sights down alone, standing completely still, staring at the horizon. Nothing strange about solo campers, Thomas thought, but something felt off as night come. Thomas got ready to sleep, but the man was still standing there in the same position, never sitting, never eating, never moving, just staring. Around midnight, Thomas woke up 2 footsteps slowly grinding across the gravel. He peeked through the mesh screen of his tent. The man was standing right beside Thomas's fire pit, hands at his sides, staring at the dying embers. He wasn't looking at Thomas, just the fire. After several minutes, the man turned around and walked back to his campsite, stood in the same spot as before, and resumed staring into the night. Thomas didn't sleep again. At dawn, Thomas stepped out of the tent. The man was gone. Relieved, Thomas packed up to leave. As he walked toward his car, he froze. The man's campsite was still there, but the tent had collapsed, clearly old, dirty, maybe unused for years. The camping gear looked weather-beaten and abandoned, covered with dust and dried leaves. But the strangest part, on the picnic table was a faded newspaper clipping inside a plastic sheet. The headline read, "Local man missing after solo camping trip." The photo showed the same man. The date on the article was from 1994, 5 years before Thomas saw him. Thomas didn't bother checking in with the ranger station. He got in his car and didn't stop driving until he hit the Montana border. He never camped alone again.